We love to measure. So the cult of measurement is completely out of control. We want to reduce people to things so that visible activity is all that matters. We like to show we're in control. We've created a machine universe and we're applying it to people, and we wonder why all people know how to do is behave like they're cogs in a machine.
Where we need to pay a bit more attention in our worlds nowadays.
We need to relearn how to pay attention to each other. We need to learn how to value the human moment, that moment of connection, of turning to each other. How do we address our addiction to busyness? We're both dealers and addicts, to labour the metaphor. We have this assumption that we can rush into simple solutions and that everything can be turned into a pill and I can take it and I'll be instantly knowledgeable, which has one small flaw: it's nonsense. How do we dial down our lust for productivity and dial up our fascination with curiosity?
So when we're out and about with clients, we consistently hear how busy leaders are, often bouncing from one meeting to the next. They tell us how that they don't have enough time to think, enough space to step back, or an opportunity to have the conversations that really matter. Today, I'm joined with my brilliant colleague, John Higgins, Research Director at The Right Conversation, to explore why modern organizations have become addicted to busyness. What is it costing us, and why creating space might be one of the most important leadership disciplines in our time? John, you spent the last few years researching spaciousness and attention. Why has it become so uncomfortable to pause nowadays?
Well, I think in our day-to-day life, we don't really like to pause. It's socially the most acceptable thing to say to someone, keeping busy, and to reply, not too busy. You will freak people out, I promise you. And it's actually this whole notion of keeping in motion. Being visibly active is something that's lauded at school, in the workplace. Everybody is rewarded for being visibly active.
And this is because we're measuring busyness rather than measuring other things that might be important in organizational life as well. What are your views on that?
We love to measure. And if measurement was going to have delivered the economic nirvana, we should be about 10 times richer than we are. So the cult of measurement is completely out of control. And what we've also done is we've gone back to the time of Henry Ford and his production line, and this whole notion of we want to reduce people to things which we can be, so that visible activity is all that matters. A mutual colleague of ours, Alison Reynolds, in one of her Harvard Business Review pieces, repopularized the phrase tyranny of the tangible. And it is, we like to touch and we like to show we're in control. And it gets very hard for executives and management to not show visible control. You're demonstrating grip over your workforce. And what happens then? You get a very compliant workforce, or you get quiet quitting. You get a whole load of subversive activities. But what you don't get is imagination. You don't get discretionary effort. What you do is people feel like they're cogs in a machine.
Yeah.
So I'd say that we've created a machine universe, and we're applying it to people, and we wonder why all people know how to do is behave like they're cogs in a machine.
So we're measuring those outputs, right? So what are we missing? What are we missing that we're not measuring? And in terms of your work around spaciousness, what is the piece that would add more value to organizations?
Well, if only we were measuring outputs, whereas actually we tend to, which are quite difficult, because we like to actually, outputs. What are the consequences of actions? These are often a long way downstream. Actually what we, in the substitute for that, we prefer to measure activity, because we think that is some way linked to output. And the other thing we prefer to do is measure we call about objective truth. We have a terror of quality, of talking about quality, because that requires us to exercise judgment. And that means we're into the world of the subjective. And we talked about the tyranny of the tangible somewhere. We're in the tyranny of the scientific. I hate to tell people, but human beings are not like lab rats. We are not things that live in test tubes. We do not behave like the scientific method.
Yeah.
And that's really our love of science. And I am a big fan of it, but it's been misapplied to the human side of organizational life.
What are we missing then? In terms of your work, what are we missing in terms of where we need to pay a bit more attention in our worlds nowadays?
We need to relearn how to pay attention to each other. We need to learn how to value the human moment, that moment of connection, of turning to each other. We've got so used to treating ourselves and each other as things that we've forgotten that actually, you know what means I really sing when I'm working with someone?
Yeah.
I might love them. I mean, that's
Well,
a terrifying word to bring into the workplace. Why do you get on with that colleague? Well, actually, I'm extraordinarily fond of them and I wish them to shine. That is a completely different feeling to, I want to maximize their contribution to my performance this year.
yeah.
One will deliver amazing things. The other will just give you so-so.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I personally, if I don't feel like I'm being productive in a week, I have this thing when I sit back at the end of a week and look at what I've achieved, what have I accomplished, what have I done. And sometimes when I sit back and think, I don't feel like I've really achieved much this week, I have a bit of a guilt thing going on. And I'm just curious. I mean, I'm sure lots of people feel like that. What is it that's driving that in us to feel, I haven't achieved or I haven't done or, felt busy, but what have I actually done this week? What is it in us that kind of making us behave in that way? Because I'm not getting any pressure internally to make sure that that's done right, but I still have this thing inside me that feels, have I kind of achieved what I needed to achieve this week?
Like nearly everything, it's a matter of an overplayed strength rather than, sort of something being inherently bad. So, guilt and things like this can be a source for good. They can mean that we behave well towards each other. But, Protestant work ethic, all these things do result in us valuing ourselves through, have you done something demonstrable? And and at one level, I could say, oh, well, Anthony, we need to lie you on the couch and explore your relationship with your mother. This is obviously
You've tried that a few times, John.
We never got anywhere. But the point is that we are soaked in a culture that values activity. To say, I just went on a walk today. I mean, and it's taken me a long time to step away from sort of the timesheet mentality and to be able to say, I do a lot of research. I have no idea if a conversation I have is going to be useful or valuable, sometimes until years afterwards.
Yeah.
And it takes a real leap of faith to say, right, I am going to trust to the process. I mean, you get it in sports, people. They'll go on about, we trust to our process. If I do the right things, the outcome will take care of itself.
Yeah.
So for instance, for me to connect well with people, I have learned not to rush. I have learned to actually genuinely pay attention to them. On good days, I have bad days, as you unfortunately have encountered, Anthony. But that capacity to take the experience of others seriously, to trust that what I need to hear from them will come out in due time if I don't try and force it. And that capacity to be patient, again, doesn't fit with our culture. So your desire at the end of every week to have got a to-do list and ticked everything off, that is a great thing. I'm just thinking about our company would not be in the state it is in if you hadn't got that drive. But you and I have a fascinating tension, because you'll want to say, so John, what have you done this week? And I'll say, well, I've I drafted something, but I threw it out again. I've had half a dozen fascinating conversations, but I have no idea, whether they are going to be tangibly productive. I just want to link to a particular story with, Megan Rates, who you know and I work very closely with, she had the wonderful experience of having to leave her business school to do the research into spaciousness.
Right.
Because the only thing they knew how to measure her on was her teaching hours, how many hours she spent in the classroom. Now, they the fact that she is whatever in the world's top 50 management thinkers, and the two of us have been shortlisted twice for breakthrough ideas, that emerged intangibly over years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it really makes management feel really uncomfortable when they turn around to you and say, how long is this going to take? And, Megan and I would say, well, we'll know in a couple of years whether we've got something.
Yeah.
Can you guarantee that this is going to be useful to leaders and managers? Might do.
Yeah.
Who knows? We hope so. That's our intention. Hasn't failed us so far. But that just makes people very anxious. And it is this thing of, how do we dial down our lust for productivity and dial up our fascination with curiosity?
Yeah.
So I think what, for you, Anthony, is the thing that the mixing desk that you're trying to work with is, how do I keep my urge for productivity under control, but actually turn up my capacity for curiosity? And almost at the end of the week, which is, how many unusual conversations did I have this week?
Yeah.
How many points of dissonance? How many times was I rocked? Was I made to see the world differently? And that's a very different way of auditing the effectiveness of your week. And we talk about, the theme in the spaciousness that's really appeared is that it's the quality of our attention that is our biggest unmanaged resource. When we first started doing the work, we're saying, well, isn't this like time management? It is sort of a little bit, but it's not.
Yeah.
It is about, can we pay attention to how we pay attention? And what the deluge of distraction has introduced to us is the new critical discipline is to understand how you are paying attention to the world.
Yeah.
And then it gets really tricky, because it's, by the way, this is not a matter of time. This is a matter of you're choosing in the split second, how am I going to turn to the other? How am I going to turn to the moment? And again, it could be that, this virtualization of the world is part of our encouragement to treat each other as things. I mean, you're a head on a box, and there's all sorts of research which says at some level I'm being really freaked out because, at some level there's a disconnect between, what your face is saying and what I'm hearing, and my brain is going, oh, there's something not quite right here. But that sense of not valuing relationships, not valuing interdependence.
Yeah.
And so our attention is drawn more and more to the thing, to the entertainment. Whereas, of course, to connect deeply with someone, back to the digestion, the processing speed, that hasn't changed at all.
Yeah. So, John, this whole thing about attention deficit, what's it costing organizations? What does it really mean for organizations?
They don't invest in the future. They are incredibly short term. I cut my teeth working with the balanced scorecard back in the 90s. And there it was the idea that organizational learning underpins customer satisfaction, operational effectiveness, and your financial performance. And instead, what happens is, because learning became, it doesn't pay off immediately, usually. Not serious management learning, not learning about how do I get the best from my people? How do I actually create an environment which motivates people? How do I use language that doesn't mean that people don't give a damn about my company? Just as an aside on that one, I love the chief executive of one of the global banks who recently referred to a large chunk of his people as lower value human capital. That's really going to encourage long-term focus on how does this organization learn? In that case, that organization needs to learn that words matter. If you refer to people as low value and you refer to them as capital, okay, guess what? I'm going to behave like that.
Yeah.
And by the way, by and large, as soon as you label one chunk of people like that, their entire focus is on how am I going to survive? Am I going to exit, or am I going to play political games? In the case of that particular organization, I'm going to track them over the next few years. I'm convinced that their collective intelligence is going to nosedive, and we'll see their performance dip. But the real challenge is, how do you acknowledge the reality of how organizational learning is seen in organizations? One of the people we interviewed for the research, terribly senior, she's on the board, I think, of one of these big global companies, famed for all sorts of things. And she said that when people attend any form of development activity, whether it's a technical training, a management training, they have to record it on their timesheets as non-productive time. In other words, time spent on investing in the future is not valued.
Mm.
And that ties back into when we fixate on saying there's got to be a direct, tangible result from I'm going to go on this workshop or this learning event and it's going to result in this improvement in performance. That again reveals a fantastically simplistic understanding of how organizations work. And I'll just close this one off. I just love the H.L. Mencken quote from the 1920s, which is that to every complicated situation, there is a simple, straightforward, compelling argument that has one flaw. It's completely wrong. And this is the problem, is that when people want to talk about investing in learning, what they don't know is that means about intangible learning. They know how to do learning that will improve things in the short term. They don't know how to invest in how do we encourage people to be less egoistical? How do we recruit people who actually give a damn about other people and to the collective intelligence and not to their personal ambition?
Yeah.
And the real challenge for an organization is how do you actually create a reward mechanism where you really reward and encourage team behaviors, team promotions, rather than individual behavior and individual promotion. Within our spaciousness work is this sense that measurement has become an end in itself. Is the other thing. So it's to do with the way that we go about change in organizations. And we like to do, it has a place, I would say an overplayed place. We do a diagnosis, come up with a plan, and then we implement it. Now, that unfortunately immediately creates a problem because you involve the people who are doing the diagnosis are usually not the people who are going to implement it. And by the way, all sorts of contextual data gets lost by the people doing the diagnosis. Whereas I come from an action learning world where the whole point is that by and large, you change and you actually make a difference to organizations by doing something and seeing what happens rather than talking about it and planning it. And to me, the busyness thing is in the space of all this uncertainty, people try and control more and more and more. So in a sense, as a sense of overload goes up, the anxiety goes up. So people's need for control and certainty goes up, rather than them saying, how do I step towards the uncertainty rather than control what I can't control? And you see it in every big institution I ever go into. I just see people using reports, measurement as an anxiety management device. And if that was publicly acknowledged that that's what it was doing, that'd be fine. Why are you producing this report? Why are you insisting on all this data? Oh, I'm just managing my anxiety. That's okay. Can we do that a little more efficiently so that people can get on with their day-to-day job, please? But instead, what happens is that this endless attempt to control and predict results in people not having the space to get on with their actual work.
So what would you do? What would be almost the opposite to reporting and checking in and evaluating and all that sort of stuff that you've just described? What in terms of that sort of more spacious world where you get together, you talk things through, lack of agendas, all that type of stuff that we've talked about before. What would that look like for you?
Invite a group of people together and you legitimize the time for them to come together, usually for a couple of hours. And you give them a broad invitation, which is within the organization, measurement has got out of control. So I would invite, just for a couple of hours, a cross-section of people together, or a group who felt safe enough to come together and say, okay, when has measurement been useful to you? When has measurement got in the way? And so what you're always trying to do is say, when's something working well and when it's not working so well? because we're trying to get out of the binary of good and bad. And I noticed in my language, and I think in quite a lot of this, I said, oh, measurement bad. It's like, measurement's okay. It can be both, a force for good in the world, and it can be really destructive. But I get this group together and invite them and trust to their intelligence. And the other problem is usually I let these conversations, when I'm doing these sorts of inquiries, run for 2 hours or about 1 hour 50. So I give people 10 minutes back at the end.
Yeah.
And it is this thing of, the idea is, well, we're going to need to have a 50-minute meeting and then we need to rush to conclusion. So again, one of the things I usually do when I'm doing these sorts of processes, bring people together, 2 hours with a loosely framed thing. And rather than say, okay, what are we going to do at the end of this? Which I can assure you guarantees that the entire value you've got from people thinking deeply about it has just gone, is you then say, yeah, and if let's give you each time to muse on about this. When you get some thoughts, we'll reconvene and we'll invite you to come back together again. And again, from a management point of view, that's terrifying, because you say, so you convene this group for a couple of hours and they haven't had an outcome. Not yet. And have you directed them? No, I'm trusting to their collective intelligence. Yeah. And again, psychologically, this is the huge shift, is however much we talk about treating people as grown-ups in workplaces, the parent-child model, at some level, a lot of leaders and managers behave like a mummy and a daddy to their staff. And that invites rebellious child, compliant child, all that sort of psychological stuff. But if you invite people to be adult, they are adult. Yeah. But it does mean they might say things you don't want to hear. Yeah. I mean, if you're the the responsible for a whole load of the reporting load, and you're told, you know what, the staff survey means absolutely nothing to me. That last all town hall meeting meant nothing to me. And then how do you, as the senior executive, not step into the defensive routine of, well, that's you should be paying attention. You should be valuing my reports, rather than say, oh, that's unusual. That is your reality.
Yeah. Yeah. You make a really important distinction between doing mode and spacious mode. What do you mean by that? And can you share that a little bit, please?
Well, this came out of, the endless amount of inquiry groups, interviews, and in-company work we've done. And it's ironic. We thought, how do we invite people to explore their reality? And people love a 2x2, so it has a certain legitimacy. So at one level, you certainly cannot reduce spaciousness to a 2x2, but we're going to use a 2x2 because actually it sort of helps. Yeah. So we came up with these two modes to describe what's going on. Now, our world is dominated by what we call a doing mode. That love of activity, that love of tangible busyness, whether it's for psychological reasons, business reasons, we just like to be busy because that's the outcome. Now, the spacious mode, which runs along sort of the other axis, is the one that things happen more slowly. It's where you see a different quality of attention. So with the doing mode, we tend to have a very focused attention. Whereas with the spacious mode is where we sit back and we look almost sideways as well. We're more open to ways of knowing and being that don't fit as easily as they do into the doing mode. Yeah. And that is also where we begin to pay attention to the quality of our relationships. This is where we seek to connect with others more deeply, where we're looking to acknowledge interdependence rather than ego, where we're looking to say, you know what, we're only going to achieve this together. And so when we get that spacious mode and that doing mode coming together, that's when we flourish. Because it's when the two come together that we ensure that what is important is governing what the doing activity is doing. Yeah. Yeah. What we by and large find is that we have a low spacious mode and a high doing mode. That's where busyness takes them. Then if we talked about the other two bits of it, where you have neither spacious mode nor doing mode, well, it's stuckness. And when you've just got spacious mode, that's where idealism lives. And that's the fantasy life.
Is there a danger that we're seeing people more and more of a way of getting things done rather than the actual person itself? And is that a condition of not having enough time to spend with people and building those relationships?
No, I mean, this is one of the myths. I don't have time. Which again, I can see lots of people going, "Oh, this is ridiculous." No, you are choosing to prioritize your activity in a way which says, "I do not value the quality of my human connection."
Yeah,
and that's fine. But don't say, "I don't have time," because you are choosing. You're always choosing, and the more senior you are, the more choice you have, and that really is difficult. Because we reward people for instrumentalizing others, for treating people as things.
Yeah.
And again, when I look at what, throughout our education system, and if I look at the way that in the business schools, what gets encouraged is so individualistic. And yet we know that more and more of life is achieved through collaboration and through collective endeavor.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so it's almost like the more we've become dependent upon the contribution of others, the more we've retreated into the fantasy that I can control things. And then we come into this wonderful thing of, you get into that, the rebirth, which is, it's never gone away, the love of heroic leadership. And you get into that pattern of people say, if only so-and-so, if we had a great leader. And I remember I can quote this one because it came from the FT, Financial Times, in the 1990s. And it was when IBM was going through one of its, periodic crises. And they brought in a new chief executive. And the headline was, I think it was Lou Gerstner, I think that was the name of the guy, rescues IBM. And Henry Mintzberg, who is one of my favorite management writers, wrote something along the lines of, so Lou did this all by himself. He turned around this massive organization. And again, it's our desire to locate something within an individual who seems to have complete agency, which again is a doing mode way of knowing the world. What was disappeared was all the work and the quality of relationships, and what else was going on within the IBM universe, which meant they were able to turn around their organizational performance.
Yeah. Right. So you've spent years researching spaciousness and you've developed a space model, right? So can you talk us through the elements of what that space model is?
So this is, again, so this is, as you said, this is years of research building on even more years. I think I'm into decades of research on this now. And it is about how do we address our addiction to busyness. This is the umbrella under which this is all around, and our capacity. And we're both dealers and addicts, to labour the metaphor. And at the same time, part of our argument is that we have this assumption that we can rush into simple solutions, and that we can, everything can be turned into a pill, and I can take it and I'll be instantly knowledgeable, which has one small flaw: it's nonsense. But apart from that, it's a great idea. So we know that we have to play the game of how do we give some sort of distillation, rather than me saying, well, you better read our book and the research studies, and it'll take a few hours. Actually, it'll take a few weeks, and then you should have a long conversation with me and Megan and all our friends, and then work it out for yourself anyway. Yeah. That doesn't play. So
sadly not.
Yes. We got taken into a darkened corner by our publisher, who said, create an acronym so that people have some idea of how to access your research in a way that actually they can do something with. So we fortuitously came up with the word space, which, given its spaciousness, isn't that a coincidence? So the S stands for safety. And that is both physical safety and it's the psychological safety. And again, on a brief side note on that, psychological safety has had as one of the most traduced phrases known. Psychological safety is a smelly, rough-edged experience, and it's got equated with niceness. It just drives me nuts, and I don't know how Amy Edmondson feels about it as the person who coined the phrase. But if we're thinking about psychological safety, it's being in an environment where people can express difference, where they can actually come together in a heartfelt, strongly felt way, but know how to do it with respect, and actually know how to be with each other when you get it wrong, when you are, more abrupt, more emotional than you need to be. So again, S is for safety. The P is all about your relationship with people. We come up with the notion that there are two ways of understanding the type of relationships you are in and you invite others into. And it's almost you need to do a little bit of an audit of what you're about. And the two forms of relationship we wanted to identify were, are you in ventilator relationships or are you in vacuum? Now, vacuum relationships with the good old Hoovers are the ones that suck the life out of you. And they are also the ones where people experience you sucking the life out of you. So, Anthony, every so often, I think you might have experienced me like that. So, whereas the ventilators are the ones who you just feel buoyed up from. You walk out of a conversation with somebody or just sit the way they are with you, you just bounce. You feel life is better because of them in your life.
Yeah.
And again, it's that often we don't know, particularly if we're a manager or a leader in an organization, we're not sure. There are some people who feel better because of us. And actually, we need to find out about that. And we need to value it. Because again, that's a bit weak. No, because if people feel really full of energy and life because of their encounter with you, that to me is an example of pretty primo leadership.
Yeah.
So that's the P.
I love that.
The A is actually the pivot of the whole thing. That is the attention. What is your mix of focused attention and broad attention? What is your capacity to attend to the specific, and what is your capacity to attend to the general? What is your capacity to pay attention to tangible activity, to the objective world? And how does that compare to your capacity to attend to things that don't fit into your reporting matrix, things that don't fit with your measurement system? How do you deal with the qualitative, the subjective, the personal? And again, within any setting, you should pay close attention to when was the last time I encountered something which didn't fit with how I already know the world. Because if you haven't had that experience recently, be concerned. Which then takes us on to the C, which stands for conflict. And that is, again, oh my goodness, we don't want any conflict in this organization. Like heck you do. And because we've used the word conflict quite provocatively, because it helps spell the word space, but it's really about dissonance. Yeah. When did you actually have yourself shaken up? When did you encounter something that made you think, I no longer know the world as I thought I did? When did I've got my identity is up for grabs here. And this is where, I have an experience in my early consulting life where we were designing a new product portfolio for an insurance company. And we brought in some prospective customers, end user customers for this. And they looked at the product. They said, it's a bit, I don't really like it very much. And the senior executive took myself and my consulting colleagues to one side and said, which idiot here brought those people into the room? So we stayed with that. And then what became clear once he had calmed down was they had created something that looked utterly beautiful and brilliant, but meant nothing to the end customer.
Yeah.
And that, again, that was dissonance. And when we encounter dissonance, that's when we get these sorts of unsophisticated reactions.
Yeah.
The E stands for our physical environment. Because when we ask people the question, what does spaciousness invoke in you? It usually has a physical context. It's about walking by the sea. It's about being in a big religious space. It's about being in an environment where actually you get a sense of perspective. And it's often about having your senses stimulated. I mean, we take people into offices and factories and everything that smell horrible, look horrible, and we wonder why people aren't at their best. One of my favorite people that I interviewed I think he was in Mumbai.
Right.
And he was saying that one of the things he always does is to make sure that he can see something green out of his window. And that whole sense of he has to see nature. And we actually interviewed someone, and this is an activity that takes place in the UK and the US, which is fly fishing for, veteran servicemen and women, and for about to deploy combat troops.
Right.
And it's this idea of taking them into nature allows a different conversation to take place for people to connect more deeply. And again, at a more day-to-day level, why is it when we want to have a conversation, we're going to have it in a room? And again, we have this thing of just go and have a walk with someone by a river. And walking side by side somebody, you will have a different quality of conversation. And it's Megan and I mean, this is our research method, was to meet fortnightly and go for a 2 to 3 hour walk by a canal. And we dressed it up, and it's got lots of posh words, but basically it was getting out of our heads and into our bodies.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it makes such a difference when you're in a different place, talking to people in a place that you want to be. I think, as you say, nature and going for a walk together, I've always had my best conversations with people in those situations. So, John, if somebody wants to create more spaciousness tomorrow around them, where should they begin? What could they do? Some practical stuff.
Well, I would start with some self-work. And it is that old cliche, the more you know yourself, the better you're going to be able to be. Stop being a black box and realize that how you pay attention to the world is your choice. And so step one is to notice, what am I instinctively drawn to noticing, and what do I habitually not notice? I mean, you've got all the data around you, your relationships in your life, your other half, if you have one, your kids, they will be telling you what you are not very good at paying attention to. So that's one. And I'd be quite serious about this one. I mean, things like coaches are hugely important. I myself spent years in psychoanalysis because, to do the cognitive change isn't very difficult. I need to be more attentive to people. Yeah. What stops you? Well, it's actually, I've got a voice inside me, which is my dad telling me that actually I just need to crack on. And if you want to see some examples of this, I will risk, Anthony, you're going to hate me for this. I'm going to use a sort of language that nobody wants to hear in polite society. I am part of an autoethnographic network. What that means in practice is you do some first person writing.
Right.
So it invites people to write subjectively about how they know the world. Where does my relationship to authority come from? Where does my relationship to busyness come from? And I would actually advise people to do some journaling. Why do I need to be busy? What need in it is it meeting? And what does it mean that I'm not paying attention to? And the idea is, if you do that sort of journaling, just do it weekly. Come back to it every week. You'll see some patterns. And by the way, you can do lots of interesting journaling ways. I have a colleague who, I leave voice notes with when I'm in a heightened state, and they then feed back to me what they've heard.
Right.
Megan has started doing something with. There was an Irish podcaster who it's called "What Is the Good Life," and as a result, he asked at the end of every recording, and when Megan did this, you answer, what is the good life to you? Now, Megan and a colleague of hers every Monday morning for 20 minutes just talk together about what they're doing that week. And the informing question is, what does it mean to live well this week?
Nice.
Just 20 minutes with somebody you trust to answer the question, what does the good life look like for the week ahead? And that means that you're anchoring your activity into something that has meaning and purpose to you. And that's just 20 minutes. And people, you'd be quite willing to go off to the gym or go for a walk for 20 minutes. Just have a conversation with a friend who's going to hold you to something meaningful and weighty, not just your to-do list. So that's the personal work.
Nice.
The relational work. So in terms of things you people can do the self-work. Then there is also paying attention to the relationships you're part of. And it's the notice, who haven't I spoken to recently? What are the type of people I avoid having conversations with because I view them as too time consuming, they're not valuable enough, or I just feel uncomfortable with? And it is this idea of thinking of the phrases of ventilators and vacuums, which is with the people who are vacuum people in my life, how can I either invite them to show up differently, or how can I contain them? It's almost like I'd advise you to do a relationship audit. That's something you can do right away. Go through all the people who are in your network. Who's a vacuum and who's a ventilator? Who are the ones that fill you up, make you feel great, and who are the ones who suck the life out of you?
Yeah.
And which of those, then you can start saying, what can I do to change that relationship? Or if it's in my power, or end it.
Yeah.
You don't have to just stay mates with people for the heck of it.
Yeah.
Even in workplaces, you can find workarounds.
Yeah. Yeah. And presumably you could do that the other way around in terms of how you show up for other people too.
Oh,
right?
It's much easier to judge other people, but then to turn it on, and that then would inquire into, how do I find out how people really experience me? And this then gets really difficult, because you might find that people think you're absolutely marvelous because you control a big budget.
Yeah.
And it's got absolutely nothing to do with you as a person, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's, how am I being experienced by others is one of the most difficult and important things you can do.
Yeah. Cool.
So I've talked about, what we can do as individuals, which is, do some self-reflection, do some work with that. There's some relational work, which is, who can I have a different type of conversation with? How can I do a bit of a people audit? And if I'm looking at a organizational level, what about actually doing a measurement audit and a report? Just stick with measurement. What are the measures that we're doing at the moment that actually add some value, are useful to people? And really look with them through the eye of, we need to cut these down. And my favorite example of it may sound really simplistic, but this is how it happens, is we interviewed chief executive of a pharma company. And he was complaining about, there's a lack of strategic conversation here. So sat down with him and we said, so just show us your monthly meetings with your direct reports. But could just show us the agenda of what you cover. And guess what? The agenda, 99%, was all about operational performance.
Yeah.
And they might have a little bit of strategy, and how things are looking for the future at the end. And so he said, until you change that conversation, nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
And so it is, what's the reality of what you talk about, not the fantasy of what you talk about.
Yeah. I think we're often very quick to point the finger at other people, aren't we? And not think about actually, what agenda am I driving as a leader in this business at the moment? Yeah. I think that whole bit about strategy in particular, we hear a lot, right? Where people aren't thinking strategically, thinking far enough out in advance, but who's causing that conversation to happen?
I've been involved with the right conversation right from its early days. When Anthony was but a gleam in somebody's eye, which not quite that long ago, but and it drew me in because it is in the quality of our conversation that everything lives. And again, at the risk of being pretentious, words create worlds. How we talk about things creates how we experience and notice and are in the world. I can think of no more important resource than our language and how we use it together. And the other thing why I love, why I think conversations are so important, why having the right conversation, is because this is a social activity. If you can have a conversation with yourself, my elder brother certainly does, and probably some people view me as having conversations by myself too. But a conversation is a social interchange between two people or more. And yet we'll go and equip people with individual skills. We'll tell people, be braver. And what we're not paying attention to is, but it's all to do with how power is being experienced. It's all to do with, how we're creating the environment where people can show up together, how we turn towards each other. It's incredibly intimate as well, because the words we use do touch each other. If I'm really willing to go out on a limb on this and say why I do this stuff, is when somebody says something to you, the words go into your head, they change your brain chemistry, they change your body chemistry. Words are about as damn well intimate as you can get. They get deep inside you. And when people say, oh, it's just words, it's not. Oh my goodness. We've all had that experience where somebody has just brought us alive, made us feel life's worth living, and we've also been touched by somebody's words that have made us feel worthless. The words really matter. And that's where I come from. And so in my time with organizations, when I'm working with them, is I'd say, can you just take seriously how you talk about things, please? It matters.
Yeah.
Because it is your greatest discretionary skill. And we label it as communications. We put it to one side. And we're fixated with, we often think, the conversation is, it's about a broadcast thing. I have a particular beef with one of the political parties who, one of their sort of campaign things, they said, we had 6 million conversations. So I was thinking, you didn't have a single conversation. What you did is you went and talked at people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the whole point is, if you are going to step into a conversation with somebody, you are willing to be touched by them and they are willing to be touched by you. I mean, it's a way of getting close to people.
And John, where can we see some of your research? Tell us about where you're living and some of the things that you've done more recently, as well as some of your keynotes as well, because I always think that's quite fascinating.
The most prestigious keynote we did was, so Megan and I were interviewed by Brené Brown a few years ago on her podcast, who I must say is one of the best interviewers I've ever come across, because she just brings her own research alongside yours rather than trying to colonize it, or, you don't get into a peeing contest. You can find references to my numerous Harvard Business Review and Sloan Management Review articles, and for articles for other journals on the Right Conversation website, and also on Megan Rates' website as well. And in terms of, there are lots of podcasts there as well. I think that's enough.
John, thank you for sharing your research and your thinking and some practical ways leaders can begin to create conditions for better conversations and better thinking and ultimately better performance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony.